Alrighty, I'm having incredible difficulty with my computer and hard drive, so let this be a lesson, don't update your Mac. Also, if you hear any random sounds throughout the video, it's mostly Kitty. Anyway, let's talk about New Texas Giant, shall we?
I'm gonna rank every coaster and give them my review. Every drop and every hill, every launch and every loop. Rate it 1 to 10 and then we'll do it all again. Gonna rank and review every coaster.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Mario. This is a channel all about amusement park type stuff, but mostly coasters. And today, in my never-ending journey to rank and review every single coaster I have ever been on, we're going to be talking about New Texas Giant. But real quick, I just wanted to say thank you to anybody that's subscribed. You guys are awesome. And to anybody that's not subscribed, you better subscribe, or else mostly Kitty is going to scratch your face off. But without any further ado, let's review. Now to kick things off, let's go over some of the stats real quick. This coaster is located at Six Flags Over Texas, which in my opinion is a pretty darn good park, but that's another video for another time. New Texas Giant was formerly just Texas Giant until the coaster manufacturer RMC converted it from an old wooden coaster to a brand new hybrid coaster. And while I never rode the old version, it did not look fun. I've heard no good things about it. So I think it's safe to say that the RMC version is miles better than the original. Anyway, more stats, getting a little ahead of myself. New Texas Giant has a height of 153 feet. It has a max speed of 65 miles per hour, a track length of 4,200 feet, which contributes to a relatively long ride duration of about 1 minute and 5 seconds from the end of the lift hill to the start of the final brakes. The coaster's tall, it feels tall. The coaster's really big, it takes up a lot of space, and it feels that way, and you definitely feel like you get a lot of bang for your buck with this coaster. Now this is RMC's first conversion from a wooden coaster to a steel iBox coaster, but it is just as good as any other RMC, better than some, worse than others, delivering a fantastic variety and large amounts of airtime, while somewhat lacking variety overall. This coaster's main focus is pretty much just airtime. You do have laterals scattered throughout, but you don't really have any positive forces pushing you down into your seat, and there are no inversions, so there's no variety in that regard either. That being said, as far as the airtime category is concerned, it nails that. And since airtime is probably my favorite sensation on a coaster, I love this ride. Now, I won't waste too much time talking about the off-ride experience with this coaster. There's not a whole lot to say. There's not a ton of theming, although I do really like the cars. There is a bit of theming in the station, I suppose. I honestly kind of forget what it is. I think it's just general Texasiness. But aside from the theming aspect, the ride looks fantastic. It's really imposing. The first drop and lift hill are just towering over the queue line. So if you're not a huge coaster fan, it's probably really intimidating entering this ride, and aesthetically this ride is very similar to Steel Vengeance, and I think Steel Vengeance looks amazing, so that's definitely a good thing. And I suppose I'll touch on operations, because why not? Now these trains, like most RMCs, have a seatbelt and a lap bar. That didn't slow the operations down too much. Speaking of the trains, these are some of my favorite trains out there. These trains actually have stadium seating, so every single car has 2 rows. The front row is a little bit lower than the back row, so you get a pretty good view no matter where you're sitting. And on top of that, if you're sitting in the very, very back row, your airtime is a little more dramatic because you're further off the track. In addition to that, the trains are just super comfortable, and the way the lap bars sit on you is preferable, in my opinion, to the newer RMC trains. The newer RMC trains have a lap bar that sits pretty much where your waist and your legs kind of meet. These Gerstlauer design trains that are on New Texas Giant sit on your lap. And for me, I think that's preferable. I don't feel as constrained. The lap bars themselves are relatively comfortable as well, so there's not too much discomfort on your legs, despite having some really good airtime on the ride. So these trains are really, really great. I probably talked about the trains too long at this point, but I love them. Some people don't like them, but me personally, I think these trains are great. And that transitions us nicely into the on-ride experience. So to go through the layout straight out of the station, well, you go straight, you roll down a turn to get some speed to get you to the lift hill, and then you hit the lift hill. Now, when you get to the top of the lift hill, there is actually a bit of on-ride theming. I guess, again, it's just General Texas-ness. General Texas. That sounds like a crappy superhero. General Texas reporting for duty. I don't know what their power is, just making things bigger. So again, I'm not sure if that's theming, but hey, you know, it's there. Cresting over the lift in that first drop, no matter where you're sitting, you are going to get a decent amount of airtime that gets progressively stronger the further you get towards the back. So while the airtime is really great and you get sustained ejector airtime in the back row, the front and middle rows still get a decent amount of airtime, which is nice. You pick up a considerable amount of speed after that 170-something foot drop. And this is probably where you will start to notice one of the quirks about this ride. It feels like you can feel every single connection in the track. And it's not a bad thing at all. It's still like insanely smooth. This is like overall one of the smoothest coasters I've been on. It's just so weird. Anyway, you have that speed and you take it straight into a speed hill that is, I guess, sort of half of a speed hill. You go up, but you don't go down. So you get a nice, relatively sustained pop of airtime. Overall, I prefer most of the elements in the back, but this is one of the elements where the front is definitely better because you are hitting the sort of apex of that element faster speed than you are in the back row, but very, very good in every single row. After that hill, you go into an overbank, which this ride has a lot of overbanks, and I was skeptical of whether or not they would be fun at all going into this ride, but they actually surprised me. They have some decent laterals going in and or out of them depending on where you sit, and in the back row, they even provide some airtime. You're starting up high and then turning down low. You're like this, right? So your body's here. And then when you turn like that, the train's lower than where it was before, so it's pulling your body down. I think kind of something like that. Anyway, this first overbank in particular is really fun in the back row because pulling out of it, the track does dip considerably, so your body does as well. After that first overbank, you go into the ride's second overbank, which is a bit sharper in the way that it's profiled, so the airtime is a little bit stronger coming out of this second overbank, and the laterals are a bit stronger as well. After that, you hit a third consecutive overbank, and this one I don't particularly remember giving all that good of forces, but it is banked considerably more than the other two, so it almost feels like you're getting close to inverting, so it is at least a little bit of variety, but not my favorite part of the ride by any means. After that, you hit another elongated airtime hill, and this one is also really, really good. It offers mild to strong ejector airtime depending on how fast the ride is running, and this is much better than your typical speed hill on an RMC. It has you out of your seat for a good 2 seconds as opposed to like a half second. After that, you hit an overbank turn into what I believe is just a trim. I don't think it's actually a mid-course brake run. It will slow you down a tiny bit, but I didn't ever notice it like killing the momentum of the ride. So coming out of that break, you hit a relatively whippy left turn that swoops down that in the front row doesn't do all that much, but towards the back, you do get pulled out of that, delivering a nice mix of laterals and airtime, although the airtime is not super strong. After that, you pop up into a twisting airtime hill that doesn't fully come back to the ground. The airtime is a little bit better in the front because you're mostly going up for this element and you're only going down a little bit, but this element again provides a nice mix of laterals and airtime. After that, you pretty much do the inverse of that element, although this element doesn't really have laterals. You go up a little bit and then down a lot a bit. This is also one of the strongest moments of airtime if you are sitting in the back row. I remember this delivering insane ejector, especially when the ride is running fast. After that, you hit an off-axis airtime hill that provides some really strong floater airtime, bordering ejector airtime, depending on how fast the ride is running. After that, you pop into another straight airtime hill, and then a twisting airtime hill that both provide good airtime, again, somewhere between floater and ejector, depending on how fast the ride is running. And the second of those two hills providing some laterals as you switch from turning left to right. After that, you go into yet another airtime hill. At the end of the hill, you dive into a tunnel that may or may not have flashing lights. You hit a right-hand turn that does have some slight elevation changes but does not really provide any airtime. That turn dumps you outside before taking you back into a second tunnel, where you will hit a small hill taking you up a few feet before hitting another turn, exiting the tunnel, and then diving back into yet another tunnel that has an actual airtime hill this time that provides pretty good floater, a twisting airtime hill that provides another pop of floater, and then a small pop of floater for the front row before hitting the final brakes. So in total, this ride has what I would consider to be about 13 airtime moments, and as an airtime lover, I don't think it gets much better than this. You have everything ranging from mild floater to extreme ejector, and then you also do have some laterals to mix it up as well. And like I mentioned earlier, this ride, in my opinion, is best experienced in the back. That is where you are going to get the strongest ejector airtime, and that is also going to give you the most airtime moments as well. But now that we're done with the ride experience, let's get into a pros and cons list. Starting off with the pros, the thing that I've been rambling about this entire time, great airtime and the variety, the strength, and just the number of moments you have. Next pro would be the comfort of this ride. As I mentioned earlier, this is one of the smoothest rides I've ever been on. The trains also add to the rideability of this coaster, and I could just ride this coaster again and again and again. 10 out of 10 as far as comfort goes. And the last pro, it is a long ride. This ride just goes on and on and on. Even if you have to wait half an hour, even an hour and a half, you don't feel like your time was wasted because you get a very full, substantial ride experience. And as far as the cons, the only thing I could really think of, and this doesn't really bother me personally, is the fact that overall, there is not a ton of variety. It is pretty much just airtime, a little bit of laterals, and almost no positives. And I suppose if you like a more intense coaster, this isn't the coaster for you, but gosh darn, it is fun. And to give this coaster a rating out of 10, with 0 being terrible, 5 being okay, and 10 being about as good of a coaster as you can get, I personally give this coaster a 10 out of 10. Like I mentioned earlier, if you want more variety or intensity, this isn't the ride for you, but I don't personally need those things to have a fantastic time on a roller coaster, and I have about as much fun on New Texas Giant as I could possibly have on a coaster. You can make the argument for 9.5, but it's a 10 out of 10 for me personally, at least at the moment. Now, as far as where it ranks amongst the 227 other coasters I have currently been on, New Texas Giant currently sits at number 7. And I know that might seem very high to some of you, but it's just fun. Sometimes you gotta love a ride that is just pure fun. And I think New Texas Giant does a beautiful job of that. And my list is ever changing. If you guys are at all interested in seeing how my list shifts around, you can check the link in the description to a spreadsheet that has all the coasters I've talked about in this series so far. Things do flip-flop, but yeah, it currently sits at number 7. But that's gonna do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any thoughts on New Texas Giant, let me know if you've been on it, what you think about it. Tell me how wrong I am and how it shouldn't be ranked as high as it is. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. And make sure to tune in next time where I'll be talking about... No, thank you.